This is Reverend Don Lewis coming to you from beautiful Florida. And today our question comes to us from Katie Flowers, except it isn't actually a question, it's a comment. And Katie wrote to express her gratitude about my recent vlogs on the subject of suicide, that I did not approach it from an attitude of shaming and condemning people who have experienced suicide, and that I came to it without judgment. And in choosing this comment to respond to, I really do not intend to speak any more about suicide, but rather about judgment, or more precisely, judgmentalism. And, you know, we are human beings. We often do things that are not necessarily positive or even in our own interests. So it's only natural that sometimes people will be judgmental, but it's not really desirable. And I'm not saying there's never a time for judgment. There can be times for judgment. There can even be times when it's not inappropriate to be a bit judgmental, and those have to do with moments of life-threatening danger. If someone wants to rob or rape or murder you or a member of your family, you certainly should bring judgment to that situation. That is a moment when you really must put safety first. I had a friend once whose commitment to nonviolence was such that he insisted if people were trying to kill him, he would not defend himself. And that choice is certainly fine for him to make. But he was a man who did not have dependents, and I was a man who did. And my attitude was very different. I believe that, particularly if other people are depending on you, but even depending on yourself, you have a duty to defend yourself, you have a duty to preserve yourself. Having said that, in ordinary life, in things that are not life-threatening, I think judgmentalism is rarely ever a positive thing. I think it's much better to try to come from a point of love, compassion, and understanding. I think it almost always makes a better situation. And I learned this from my mother and her family. My mother used to be devoted to the old saying, never judge a person until you've walked a mile in their moccasins, and that is how she would say it. And I certainly do consider this to be extremely wise advice. Now, of course, it is worth saying that if someone is trying to rob, rape, or murder you or a member of your family, they probably have horrible stories in their background that could move you to compassion, but it's not the moment for compassion. After everything is said and done, after you're safe, if you want to be compassionate, that's wonderful. In a moment of life-threatening danger, it would be another matter. But that doesn't mean that those people aren't people too, and it doesn't mean that they didn't have their reasons. Sometimes they might even have been halfway good reasons, more often not. But I think it's beneficial, even when you cannot sympathize with the reasons, to try to understand them, because you can't really deal with anything you don't understand. You'll only make mistakes. So when dealing with people who disagree with you, when dealing with people who have made choices other than you would have made, even if you can never agree with them, it's good to try to understand why they've made those choices, what has brought them to that place. And I think that if we follow this point of view, we'll generally be happier for it. It doesn't mean we're always going to agree with those things. Sometimes we may vehemently disagree with them. But to understand them, certainly in my opinion, puts us a step or two ahead of where we would otherwise be. And I often hear people say they don't understand why someone would do this or why they would do that, but they haven't made an effort to understand. Sometimes, of course, they have, and there is no understanding. Not every situation will have a logical reason in terms of people's behavior, because people are people, and sometimes they are illogical in character. But often, if you look for why they're behaving a certain way, you will find an answer. Now, sometimes that answer will make you throw up your hands and say, well, I can't help this one, and there's just nothing more to be done. But, you know, sometimes that's the appropriate answer too. So, basically, the thought that I want to impart to you is that judgmentalism rarely helps. It clouds judgment, and because judgmentalism and judgment are not the same thing, and it causes you to see situations through a distorted lens. If you can try to understand what's going on, and even better if you can bring some compassion to it, you're usually going to have a better understanding and choose your own behaviors better, because you have that understanding. And if we look around the world at the moment, we'll see all kinds of people doing knee-jerk reactions to situations that often dig the holes deeper. Knee-jerk reactions are rarely good. It's much better to be thoughtful, it's much better to be compassionate, it's much better to be reasonable, if only for the sake of having a clear vision of the situation. So those are my thoughts on the subject of judgmentalism. I hope you find them helpful, and until next time, may you blessed be. The Tarot of Hecate. My 100-card tarot deck 30 years in the making, finally available to you from witchschoolstore.com. Check out a copy today.